What's good, everybody? I'm Indrek, he's Sodek,
Hello.
and today we're gonna talk about how Modern looked like in the first week without Lurrus. Let's go. Nagrywamy główną część. Alrighty, so as you obviously know, at this point Lurrus has been banned for a week now, and there's been a PTQ, or even super PTQ, on Saturday or Sunday. That's 2 days ago for us right now. Arizax won it with Grixis Shadow, featuring Merktide Regent, which is an addition that obviously couldn't be possible when Lurrus was still in the format. And this will be the first thing that we will talk about. Decks that used to play Lurrus and now they can't, and how they adapted. And we will start with Death Shadow because it was
Easy.
the best deck in the format before Lurrus was banned for the last couple weeks. And B, or 2, I don't remember if I said A or 1. Doesn't
It was
matter.
A. It was A.
Okay, so B. It won a PTQ, just as I mentioned. So the biggest, I think, discussion about Lurrus, about Shadow, well, not really a discussion. I think putting Giganta and Obosh into it was kind of a getting more clout move rather than actually having a good deck. But we'll talk about anyways. So the biggest decision is either you play Giganta / Obosh or you play good cards, basically all good cards. Because if you want to play Obosh, you can't play Expressive Iteration. If you want to play Giganta, you can't play Merktide Regent. And both of these cards are pretty important. I think there is one case in which you want to play Giganta, and that's if somehow you think that Germak Angler is better than Merktide, which I think is pretty hard to justify. Germak Angler has a faster Goldfish, maybe not by a lot, but playing turn to Merktide is much less common than playing turn to Germak Angler. So maybe for some reason you want to do that. But
also, if you want to rush your Delph creature, Gurmak Angler will always be 5/5, while really fast Merktide will rely a lot on Mishra's Bubbles anyway, so it won't grow.
Yep,
While you are doing this.
Ari's winning list did not play Street Rave, but that's the card that we saw in the past in Shadow, and maybe people would like to play it again. And Germak is also better with Street Rave than Merktide because, well, Merktide does not grow if you exile Street Rave for it. And if your Merktide is a 5/5, you had that already. You had Tombstalker. And people weren't playing Tombstalker over Germak Angler. So if your Merktide is not getting bigger than 5/5 consistently, then I think you'd rather play Germak. But
yeah, I saw some discussions on the Twitter with Arizax about how many Merktides you would play in the future, if 4 wasn't clunky or not, and they said that like the first one was good, and the second and third one drawn were much smaller. It was really hard to create 2 big Merktides. On the other hand, 1 big Merktide
it's usually enough.
Yeah, should be enough.
Especially since the first one grows the second one.
Yeah.
Or the second one grows the first one, rather.
Yeah.
So especially if you're not playing against a deck with Unholy Heat, and you have 2 Merktides in hand, I think you can quite often engineer the situation where you play smaller Merktide first and then larger Merktide on the next turn, so you grow both of them, and you have like 4/4 Merktide first, then you play an 8/8 Merktide, and you have 9/9 and 8/8. I think that can happen somewhat often. Also, something to keep in mind with Merktide is that Merktide is double blue, and for a deck that wants to play some basics. I think I've saw lists without basics. I don't like playing no basics. I like having at least one, and you kind of want Island with Merktide, but Island is not that great because you have 21 mana spells and like 3 of them are blue or 4 of them are blue or something, and then you have Denial in the sideboard probably. And Swamp kinda sucks with both Merktide and Expressive Iteration, so that's a point of tension, I think, as well. Like Ari's mana base was kind of okay. They had
They still played Swamp, yeah.
yeah, Swamp and Blood Crypt, and then 2 Steam Vents, 2 Watery Graves, so that's 6 mana producing lands, and then just 12 fetch lands, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that like 3 non-blue sources, 2 non-blue sources with Merktide is as much as you can go to. I think. I don't think you can go higher. But I don't know. I'm quite interested in how it will develop, and yeah, I don't really think that either Obosh or Giganta are powerful enough to warrant playing or abandoning one of your good cards. And once again, Merktide or Iteration.
True. And what do you think about the like sideboard additions that were not played in the Lurrus things? Like Arizax had Lilian of the Veil and Sion Pyro. I know that you are a fan of Lilian of the Veil in Merktide matchups, and it's kind of obvious.
I'm playing
How
Zero
would-
right now.
Yeah,
It took me a week to went to 0, but that's because I think Liliana is much better in this type of deck, and it always was. When I played Liliana back in the day, I was playing Fairies, and Fairies were much more proactive than control decks. And yep, Liliana was pretty awkward with a bunch of counter spells, as it always was. But yeah, in a deck like this, I definitely think that Liliana of the Veil is cool. I think Seasoned Pyromancer is a pretty strong card as well. I also really like Liliana Last Hope. It really overperformed for me, and I do think that this like Liliana gives this longevity to decks that were playing Lurrus before, and now you are lacking this really like this strong card advantage engine. Like you want to play Liliana at the similar way that you played Kolaghan's command before, I think. Like in those less flash based, more discard heavy sorcery, speed based Grixis decks, so red black splashing iteration basically. I do think that Liliana is pretty cool, and you can get rebuy on your Ragavan or on your Darcy. If you're playing some Snapcasters, you can get Snapcasters back. If you're playing Seasoned Pyromancer, you can get Seasoned Pyromancer back, and it's really good with Fury as well. If you want to play Fury and getting back Fury against a creature deck with Liliana, like turn 1 or turn 2 Fury to basically time walk them, then you play Liliana on free, get back Fury, and rough their board again. They can't really win after that.
Okay. And the last thing that has changed since the Lurrus ban is the addition of Stubborn Denial. Like something that was not good enough if you was playing only Shadow or only Merktide, but with 8 drops that can turn on Ferocious, it can be really good.
Denial is just such a good card.
Yeah,
It
it's
was
like a
in so many matchups. It was the most important card when Death Shadow was good back in the day. Like you are just hoping that your opponent does not have Denial so often.
Yeah, but there's one problem though. Like in 2022, we have more creatures that are impactful and we want to get rid of. For example, Solitude. There wasn't a good removal spell that was also a creature.
That's true.
So I think that Stubborn Denial have lost.
I don't know about that. I was playing Big Game Hunter.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Big Game Hunter. You know what was the best? The best use of Big Game Hunter.
Playing it with Hollow One and randomly discarding it with Buried Inquiry. That was the best.
You were playing against Eldrazi Tron, and you target their Smasher with Go for the Throat or Doomblade, and you discard Hunter, and then you Madness it, and you kill the other thing.
That's also fine.
That was pretty fire. That's why I played Big Game Hunter in Fairies.
Easy. So I think that Stubborn Denial can will be really nicely positioned, but it's not as powerful as it was like
I guess it's Solitude mostly, because like
Primeval Titan decks, yeah.
Yeah, sure, but you are tramping smaller creatures with your big creatures, so I don't really care that Stubborn Denial can't counter like Esper Sentinel or whatever. And you do have a bunch of dress downs against Titan.
That's true.
So yeah, obviously Stubborn Denial is not as well rounded, like it's not as versatile as it was back in the day, because that's true that more creatures are getting played, but still a pretty powerful card, and a card that kinda, if it stays as an important part of the format, it kinda want me to stretch mana base in Esper to play Verdict instead of Damnation, because getting Stubborn Denial on your sweeper is
Clunky.
yikers. Not what you want to see.
Okay, moving on. There's also another Lurrus deck that was really powerful and really popular. Yeah, that's a nice showing. And that was Hammer. And Hammer also got the results, maybe not as spectacular as winning PTQ, but like ending in semifinals kind of counts, I guess. So RNG specialist ended in the third place with a very interesting list. Like the list was a blue-white Hammer, and we like right after Lurrus ban, we were talking that yeah, Nettlesis should be added to the deck, but we were always thinking about one copy of it. And RNG specialist went for 3 copies of Nettlesis, so much more than I would have expected at all. That's kind of interesting. Outside that, there's one Paradise Mantle. I still struggle to understand why it's there. Maybe it's really good with reality chip plan. Maybe there's something
It
we are
is.
missing
I think
here.
it is. There's one chip as well, right?
Yeah, of course.
And how many copies of Steel Shaper gifts, if any?
One, sorry. There's one.
One Steel Shaper gifts, okay.
So the list outside that is kind of stock. We have like one Gingerbread, which is like the only flex card, and not everyone are playing it. And outside that, like we have this 3 mana Nettlesis. What's also interesting, they are playing one Horizon Canopy, even if it's not in colors, because right now without Lurrus, it's harder to use only one all the time. So
It is easier to flood out.
Yeah, that's why Canopy lands are better. Even if the deck is blue-white, the deck still has some form of redraws. About the sideboard, 3 Teferi Time Ravelers. This is the addition that was unlocked after the Lurrus ban.
And Teferi is a really good card in Hammer.
Yeah, like
Teferi
more about static ability than...
Yeah, Teferi's static is so good in Hammer.
Yeah, because you don't overextend and hope to not get 2 for 1.
It was even
2 for 1.
Yeah, it was even terrifying in Infect for a brief period of time when we still had like paper tournaments and people were playing Infect before the pandemic, but after War of the Spark. I remember Grand Prix Birmingham. It was the Hogak GP. I've played against banned Infect, and turn 1 Dork into turn 2 Teferi was about the scariest thing they could do.
Result, yeah.
Because then you just can't do anything. You can't interact with their kill. Now it's a bit better because you can play Boseju or Otawara under Teferi, at least. But it's still like a small portion of interaction that you are playing in the format. Still not great.
Another card for 3 mana is Sort of War and Peace. It's mostly played because of protection. So once you equip something, it's unstoppable in some matchups. It was like even Pyrexen Crusader was a solution to some decks that were heavily on Unholy Hit or Solitude.
Yeah, Sort of War and Peace is very good against 4-color. All of the removal spells are red-white.
Yeah, white or red.
And so I guess against blue-white as well. All the removal spells are white, so...
True. And I want to point out the rise of popularity of March of Otherworldly Light, the card that was considered maybe as a fifth, sixth copy in Blue-White Control. It turns out to be much more popular than that, and for color they start playing it. Even like I see, I can see right now March in the sideboard of Hammer. I bet that it's mostly because it can eat sagas.
Yeah,
Uh,
a decent. I can't speak for Hammer because Hammer wasn't really playing that card, but in Control, it's not really replacing Prismatic Ending as much as it's replacing Spreading Seas. It's a main deckable answer to Saga that's better with Snapcaster Mage, which is the card that Wafo recently started playing in Blue White. So obviously everybody's playing Snapcaster in Blue White now because Wafo started it. So yeah, I would look more towards the number of Spreading Seas and how it decreased in the last few weeks. Yep. I do think that you still need a main deck answer to Saga if you're playing like a slower blue deck. And March is just the best one to be playing. It's the most versatile. I even killed Primeval Titan with it for 7 mana.
Nice.
And it wasn't that bad.
You would never do that with Spreading Seas or Prismatic Ending, so obviously better. Okay, the last deck that we had on the list on our how do you do after Lurrus ban is Burn, and the changes are very marginal because like the main deck hasn't changed at all, and it's still the same list of Burn. About the Burn, Nora Decay ended in top 8 of the super qualifier with Burn. And the change was adding 2 ensnaring bridges to the sideboard. A really old school tech in Burn, something that was played in 2014, 15. It was a tech versus Eldrazi, for example, versus Hogak, and something like this. Is it really good? That's another question. I don't believe that Burn empties its hand fast enough to make it matter most of the time because instead of turn 3 using your 2 cards from hand, you're casting a Snaring Breach. So if you are in the draw, it
I
can be
think it's still
slow.
good against Shadow.
It's still okay, but you can also you can still die to Ragavan flipping your Merc spells and killing you. Yeah.
Sure. That can happen.
So but it's really good versus Merktide, so
Yep. Card
that's one
Merctide.
thing. But again, Nora Decay on the Twitter said that the ensnaring Breach addition wasn't that impactful, and it could be replaced by something like Third Palm, another Smash to Smithereens, something that's white and can attack the meta from more angles. So not that many changes. So the deck technically just lost a bit of value by not being able
But
to
now you can
return
play
with Lurrus.
Firecraft.
Yes, but Nora Decay didn't play it, and
That's why they didn't win.
But
Simple.
top 8 for this type of tournament,
They
I would
didn't
take
win.
it all the time.
Okay, I want to mention one more addition to those former Lurus decks, which we kind of missed on the list, but I just remembered about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's playing Grist in black-green decks that used to play Lurus. So Jant Saga, or like Jant Lurus decks, either food or just Saga decks. And
Mm-hmm.
Gris is a really strong card. Like, come on, this card is so good.
It does things, I would say.
It does things for sure. So yeah, definitely something to keep your eye on. Like, I played against Pant in a league last week.
I see this deck is
Yeah, and Pant
roughly
top
ended
16
in
the PTQ, right? With the deck.
yes.
And yeah, turn to Graced was something.
Okay, just to be exact, they were not playing just Jant. It was Jant Foot, which
Yes.
is kind of important. Still with Foxes, Lightning Bolts, etc. So it wasn't that all in on the Sacrifice engine.
Yeah, it
Still had
was
some.
good good food cards, so they had Goose, right?
No.
No
They
Goose.
had Ravenous Squirrel, Crowd of Familiar, Mayhem Devil, Witch's Oven. That's it.
Did they have Ragavan? They had, right?
They had.
Okay,
but
so
it's
that's
not a
how they
engine, yeah?
turned to Greased Me. Because I remember getting turned to Greased. And I just assumed it was off
You
of
let Ragavan
Gilded Goose,
attack?
but
That's
Ragavan
strange.
does it even better. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
True.
So moving on from, I kind of wanted to say losers, but it's not true really. Shadow won the PTQ, and Shadow definitely lost, I think, on this ban. Hammer, as we already talked about last week, in my opinion, gained after
In my opinion, that's like too much to say. I would say that
I think Hammer gained overall, and
I
people
don't
are
think
mostly
so.
trying out new stuff. That's why Hammer is not as popular as it used to be. But next month and a half, I think people will be back to playing Hammer, and Hammer will be just winning more than it was, because once again, Lurrus was mostly a mirror card in my opinion for Hammer.
I don't think. I feel that in most of the decks I was playing, like for example, Living End, like this Lurrus was a big difference between having a mid game and not having a mid game. And many games were based around Lurrus, and now still the raw power of the deck, like if you talk only about 60 cards you register, has gone up a bit because Nettles is a big boy. But I feel that Hammer will feel the loss here, and the deck will still be in top tier, but it won't be as dominant as it was earlier.
I think it's like
right now, Force of Vigor is even more problematic, yeah.
Yes,
because
it is. That's true.
In the long run, you can't regain your cards. For example, if Shadow Spirit is problematic in a matchup, after you destroy it once, it won't threaten you until
Sure, but yeah, like I think
lane.
Lurrus was mostly useful in Hammer in matchups where you were replaying disruption cards. So either mirror or like against Living End, you were just replaying your
Grave Hate, yeah.
Spellbomb or other Graveyard Hate. And other than that, like let's look at the most popular matchup of the former Modern. So Hammer versus Shadow, right? Hammer gained a lot by Shadow not having Lurrus.
True, yeah, I don't negate that, and I think it's.
I think
it's
overall Hammer gained on Lurrus ban.
I think overall everyone that were heavily on Lurrus, and I feel that Hammer maybe wasn't as heavy on Lurrus as Grixis, but in many matchups it was a very big part of the strategy.
Yeah, but once again, most important matchups for Hammer for Lurrus and Hammer was mirror, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, okay. Grixis Shadow was the most popular deck, right?
Yes.
And the second most popular deck was either 4-color or Hammer.
Yes.
So, other than Grixis, the most popular deck with Lurrus was Hammer.
The problem is we are talking about what's most popular, what's less popular, and in the reality, you play the 10-round tournament and you play versus Grixis 2, maybe 3 times, and
that's still a lot.
That's a lot for sure, but
and there are still many matchups in which Lurrus kind of that did not matter out of Hammer that are popular. Like Lurrus couldn't matter less against like Amulet, for example, right? Like Lurrus did close to nothing against Amulet.
Sure, but there are still many matchups when this Lurrus could change the game. For example, like I still feel that the raw power of Lurrus was much higher than the raw power of anything else added to the Hammer.
I think in many matchups, Nettles is a stronger card than Lurrus. Once again, like for example, against Rhinos, I think you'd rather have Nettles in your deck than Lurrus if you're a Hammer player.
Sure. Because once they get rid of the first wave of your creature, that big life linker, and that went to the battlefield. Like if, for example, Rhinos player have everything and they have Timely Force of Vigor that gone into for Rhinos, the game is over. But once, for example, they can't pressure the opponent fast enough, the Lurrus would easily take over the game. Now that's gone, and it's not as good as it was. But that's still some
Yeah,
type of
okay. It doesn't matter
semantics
all that
and
much, but I do
yeah.
think that Hammer either gained or was close to neutral, but I still think it was gain. Not
We'll
as
see. We'll
important
see.
not as important right now, but let's move to a deck that was, in my opinion, a clear winner and probably the biggest winner of Lurrus ban, which was Rhinos.
True.
At least for now, short term. Because the biggest problem with Rhinos was Shadow. Shadow was a pretty bad matchup for Rhinos. And if Shadow is gone, or at least less popular, then Rhinos have time again to shine. And even if Shadow is still popular, recurring explosives with Lurrus was a big part of the plan in the matchup. So still think that right here, right now, Rhinos gained a bunch. I think some sideboard cards might be more popular now. Like, for example, I do think that people will play a bit more Chalice of the Void, for example, in the sideboard. Like, in a deck that formerly played Lurrus, like the food, maybe not the food deck, but like Giant Saga, basically deck that played Bubble, but no longer will play Bubble, because some former Lurrus decks used to play Bubble and they won't now. Some still will. Some never played Bubble and won't start playing now. But there is less amount of bubbles in the format, and people will play more Chalice on Zero, I think. Because Chalice on Zero is great against Cascade, of course. I think the first copy, like, I would play one Chalice in most sideboards. I think playing two Chalices, like, you can play other cards that are better, but the first copy is pretty impactful because it costs
Yeah,
0 mana.
Chalice is also reasonable versus Amulet because
That's what I was trying to say. Yeah, that you definitely want one Chalice for against Amulet if you have it in your sideboard.
Yeah, if you're on the play, you can play Chalice for one versus some heavy Ragavan decks that will
Yeah, it
also
depends
be
on the
fine.
deck. Like, I'm playing Esper recently, and I have like, I don't know, 12 1-drops, something like that. So I'm
That's a lot,
basically
okay.
only bringing Chalice if I want to play it on Zero. I think it's not unreasonable to have Chalice on the play against Affinity. But it's a very hit or miss card, because if you don't play it on turn 1, then it's greatly diminished in power.
Yeah, but like the impact of turn 1 Chalice on the play versus Affinity is great. Speaking of okay, we're talking about Rhinos, but speaking of Affinity, I'm very curious if the lack of Lurrus will help the deck, because the first results didn't show the full uptick in the popularity of the deck. That's why like I would really like to see the blue white affinity lists like very like built in a way that you create a lot of card advantage and have huge creatures, etc., etc. But I still feel that maybe this is not where you want to be at this for now, because right now Amulet is a bit too popular to support this strategy, as well as other strange decks.
Alrighty, sorry for the little technical issue, because Sodek got the package delivered to his apartment and he had to take it. So
Yeah,
now we are back to talk
the
why
topic. Yeah.
Affinity is not great.
Maybe not great. Like, what are the problems of the Affinity right now? The problem
Okay,
is that
so Sodek will talk about problems, and then I will say why it's not great.
okay. The biggest problem is that in early stages of the new meta games, people tend to uh, play a bit more in a goldfishy style and try to do very powerful thing instead of trying to react to everything, because it's really hard to guess against what exactly you should prepare. That's why we saw a bit of the uptick of the amulet, for example. That's why we saw some other more fringe strategies that we'll talk about later on. And because of that, these decks are traditional, not the best matchups for these value-oriented affinity lists. So I think that Affinity can have its moment later once the metagame establishes and more people will be on, more fair traditional decks.
Okay, so yeah, that's basically why I think Affinity is not great, because Affinity was kind of good against Lurrus decks. Like, if your deck is a bunch of Thoughtcasts and Thought Monitors, you want to play against piles of removal. That's something you are great against. But you are kind of slow. Like, those decks don't kill fast. Affinity. It can, from time to time, with a quick Urza Saga and Nettle's draw, of course. But it's not like a reliable fast goldfish plan. Similarly to what food decks had. Like, food at the beginning of Modern Horizons 2 format could kill quickly from time to time with a right draw, but it wasn't like something you could rely on. And it's pretty easy to go over Affinity with Amulet or with a control deck, which is, I think, something that a bunch of Lurrus players will gravitate towards. Like, Affinity is not great against Sweeper into Planeswalker with Counterspell plan. It's just something that Affinity will struggle against. Sure, sometimes it will have the Mystical Dispute or Metallic Rebuke or Spell Pierce to counter the Planeswalker or the Sweeper, but for the most part, from what I've played, Affinity is pretty soft to that kind of plan.
I don't want to be rude or something, but like, we shouldn't focus that much on the strategies that does not have many results so far.
Well, but it's still very popular. People will, like, I'm not saying that blue white is good, for example, but people will play blue white because people love playing blue white, and it's
that's true. Like, I'm thinking more about the matchup versus Merktide, yeah.
But it's still control. But you kind of have to care about what people are playing, even if those decks are not great. If they will be popular and your matchup is not great, you kind of have to account for that, even though in a ideal world you won't do that, because control will always be one of the most overplayed archetypes, because people like to feel smart and people like to play control. I've said that many times. Control players are the most cringe group of Magic players by far, and like, they will just do that. Also because, like, all it takes is basically one good result from like Waffle or some other control player, and people will just copy their deck.
Yeah, copy and keep playing it until they run out of play points and
exactly. So, like, I think you do have to account for control decks, especially in leagues.
Kind of, like, still there are, in my opinion, bigger problems for blue-white Affinity than
I do think that Amulet is a bigger problem than control decks. But
for example,
as I've said, that's why I started with Amulet. But I do think that, like, in general, decks that go over the top of Affinity are the problem. And Amulet is probably the most significant one, and control decks is probably the second group of decks. Then you have, like, Tron decks, similar to control decks, will go over Affinity. Both even Eldrazi Tron goes over the top of Affinity because they have Karn, the Great Creator. So
maybe that's not over the top, but that's more like a lock piece that you can't do anything with that. Okay, but we can talk about blue-white Affinity all the time.
Or like Storm, I guess, too.
I wanted to, like, I wanted to. Oh, yeah, true. I wanted to talk more about, like, we started with Rhinos, and I wanted to make it wider and talk about the Cascade decks in general, because, like, Rhinos had really good results with the challenge. There were also 2 Living End lists in top 16 of the PTQ. So Cascade decks are one of the biggest winners of this, like, post Lurrus world. But like you, Jędrek, said, this can be short term, because Cascade decks, while they're very powerful, they are also quite easy to hate out by everyone because everyone can play Chains of the Void or whatever else they want to. But I'm curious, sometimes you can't sacrifice your 2 sideboard slots because the meta is so wide that every slot counts, etc., etc. And I'm curious how the metagame will look in, for example, like 2 months from now when this whole circle will ends up and we will be left with this semi-balance between the most powerful archetypes and where Cascade will be, because Cascade decks with Lurrus around were not the best pick ever, and right now they gained, but I'm not sure by how much they gained.
Okay, I still think that Living End is like in abstract, Living End is by far the most powerful deck in the
For
format.
sure, but the problem with it's similar to Hammer. It's very high at the raw power level.
That's true.
But
That's
also
true.
it's really hard to hate it out. So this balances.
Or easy to hate it out, rather.
What did I say?
You said it's really hard to hate it out.
Yeah, easy.
And it's easy to hate it out.
Relatively
easy, I guess. Like maybe not even easy to hate it out because
but you can
you will
attack it from many angles. And
yes, because you will often win through like one hate piece.
Yes.
It's more about the thing that you are vulnerable to graveyard hate, to multi-spelling hate, or cascade hate in general, like Flusterstorm or Teferi Hero or Teferi Time Raveler rather. You are not great against weird cards like Ensnaring Bridge to Chalice of the Void. A bunch of different things that can basically every deck can play a card that's good against you.
True.
Yeah, and I like, and conversely, Rhinos are harder to hate out than Living End, but they're also less powerful, like in the abstract, because Rhinos are a mid-range deck and Living End is as pure of a combo deck as it gets these days in Modern, I guess. Like Belcher is, I guess, more combo.
Yeah, Belcher is much more combo.
But Living End is still a combo deck, right? Like fairly combo deck.
I like to say that it's a combo deck with control elements because very often your game plan is to have fun, for example, or have like 2 grease to stop opponent from what they are doing, and then you try to finish the game.
You're more of a like Belcher is Belcher, and you are just trying to YOLO it out. And I think Living End is more like, I don't know, a combo deck like Doomsday from Vintage or Legacy. You have your own disruption piece, and then you have your combo.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
close as we can get.
Definitely, there is also the third Cascade deck, which is Glimpse, and I've seen a lot of slot machine Glimpse recently. The one with just, I don't know, Omniscience and Emrakul. And I don't know why people keep doing that. It's just so bad.
If you want to play Glimpse, just play a good Glimpse list with
mid-range stuff.
With mid-range stuff. Maybe not as mid-range as Xenovan was doing, because I don't believe that, like, if you're playing Glimpse and you don't have any percentage to win on turn 3 or turn 4 reliably, and you just rely fully on card advantage made from Glimpse, I don't think
that's not the best idea. You can just play like elementals or whatever.
Yeah, just any sort of card advantage deck, because Glimpse, while the engine is really good at creating card advantage, it's also really easy to hide out. So it's not where you want to be if you want to be a value deck.
So you want to play Tireless Provisioner, right? That's what you're saying.
Maybe Tireless Provisioner isn't needed, because the just Seasoned Pyro and Omnat are enough to create things plus generate mana. But I would still play at least a few Goblin Dark Dwellers. I would play Goblin Makers. I forgot their name.
Chancellor of the Forge.
Yeah, Chancellors. And I wouldn't cut them for more mid-range stuff for 3, 4, 5 mana, because people usually can beat very clunky decks with high curve if they are not doing something like they are not cheating them into play. Okay, there's also one thing we wanted to point out based on the PTQ results, and this was the rise of maybe rise is not the best
Showing.
idea. Showing, yeah.
Showing.
The nice showing of fringe decks that were in modern some years ago, and they were slowly disappearing, and now they had its breakout performance yet again. And there were two decks I would like to point out. It was Tron, played by
Why Principe?
yeah, so like a Tron specialist, and the list, in my opinion, is really spectacular because the deck had only like 4 cards related for kind the Great Creator to Ugin. That's it. Oh, they had Ulamog. Okay, I want to say that they don't have Ulamog. I didn't saw them. Okay, so the difference is track task instead of Wurmcoil. You want to live gain SAP instead of waiting. 3 Warping Quails in the main deck, so you have more responses to Ragavan. And 3 Relics main deck, even if you have Karn, the Great Creator, in the deck. So it's kind of ambitious. Only one Oblivion Stone with 2 Eugenies. 2 Possejus, which is ambitious in my opinion. 19 lands with 3 forests, Sound of Ugin Blast Zone. 2 Possejus, that's rude, I would say. And there's also 4 Force of Vigor in the sideboard with 11 green cards because Traktask is also green. Maybe that works.
They have more green cards in the sideboard, maybe?
No.
Still, if you are bringing forces, you can pitch force to force sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. Also, you can still hardcast it and it won't be the end of the world.
That's
sometimes. True. Yeah, like this list is really good. Also, a Principe. I don't know how to pronounce it. Is an expert of the archetype, so it's maybe that's the reason why the Tron got so far. But there's also one deck that I wanted to point out. And
okay, so before you do that,
okay,
I want to share my thoughts about Tron. Tron is bad.
Let's go.
These are my thoughts. Like, sure, sometimes it will win, but you just can't compete on Euro speed and power with linears that are now good in modern. Like, you will lose to Amulet. And Amulet's probably still the best of your matchups among those decks. Like, among those really miserable matchups for you. Like, Amulet is bad for you. Even though it's, like, once again, the best of the bad matchups for you. But still bad. Hammer, of course. Sure, you have Karns. Sure, you have Warping Whale, but you will lose more often than you will win. If you don't draw Relic, then Living End is atrocious probably for you.
I'm not that sure. Like, Living End isn't the fastest deck ever. It has disruption instead of being fast. And like when I'm looking at this list, I would say that Living End would have like 30% win rate. It has 3 relics, 3 warping whales.
30%.
It's really like it's really the matchup is really bad in reality because they have tools to stop your very fast draws. Like there's the only way you can there are 2 ways you can win. First is to go under and win on 10-4 with Street Raids, Griefs, etc. So you just not let them do anything and kill before they can, or if they, for example, play Candy Related on 10-3, they try to exile something, you go Outburst and have enough power to kill them in 1 turn. The second option is to fight a war of attrition when you need to fight through Relic, through Warping Whale that can counter your Living End, and after Eugene comes down, they can just exile your board and then finish the game with anything. Plus, there's also a card, the Great Creator, that can tutor for a Snaring Breach,
I don't buy it,
etc. It's really hard
I don't
matchup.
buy it. I don't buy that the deck with like 20 cyclers or whatever and 8 disruption pieces will lose that often against Tron. Like
But
they have
that's
3
the
relics
reality.
and 3 warping weights, but you have 4 griefs and 4 forces to fight with those cards, and you have 20 cantrips in your deck. Like I don't know.
That's like with this configuration without warping whales or without relics, I would say that it can balance itself. But with both of them, it looks really ambitious to
Nah.
say that Living End has a really good position versus this deck.
I'm not saying really good, but good, I think. Still.
Okay, what do you think about Rhinos versus Tron?
That was what I was trying to follow up with. Yeah, I think Rhinos is also good against Tron, especially if you are playing either Boseiju or Blood Moon in your deck. Just Fire Eyes into Rhinos is just as rude as it
GG.
always was. So against this
Maybe.
deck. Also, decks like Belcher probably dumping on Tron.
Also not true.
How is it not true?
Because Warping Whale stops your Recross the Paths files. So
okay, but
so
you are aware of the fact that they have to cast their own spells as well.
But they can just keep going. Okay, I assume that game one maybe can be played in a blind. Although my opponents always know how to mulligan. In
But
the
even
matchup, and
it's not even about that. Sometimes you just can't afford to hold a 2-mana card in this deck.
Sure, but even if you build your Recross pile, then Reforge the Souls is also a sorcery. So you can counter that. It's not like it's easy. Okay, you can still punish them by going ritual, Ironclad Feet, Belcher when they tap out. But if they don't, they can counter your Ironclad Feet, which is also really hard. And you need to be really fast, because if they play card the Great Creator, the game is over. Because
that's true.
Unless you play Ascension in the main deck. I'm not a fan of this based on all other matchups and postage around. I don't like relying on
can you like
well.
with Recross, can you do something like, okay, they tap out because they need to play their cards, you play Recross, and you go Manamorphose over Reforge, like Manamorphose then Reforge, and then you pass the turn, and if they go for anything on their turn and they ever tap below 2 mana, you just Manamorphose in response, you get your Reforge, you get 7 new cards, and you win on your turn.
That's kind of good, but after you Recross, and you Recross most likely on turn 3, sometimes turn 2, you will give up 2 turns for them. One just after Reforge, and the second because you drew Manamorphose. These 2 turns are very likely that they will put Karn the Great Creator. They can, even if they are on the play, they can even play Karn Liberated and attack your land, so you will never be able to cast your Reforge.
Once again, I don't buy it. I think you are giving Tron a lot of credit.
I'm just losing to it quite often.
so maybe you are just unlucky.
Maybe that's why. Overall, I feel that Tron still struggles against some of the decks you told, like for example versus Hammer. I can totally see it that attack for 10 on turn 2 or even turn 3 when you're on the play is good enough, and they can't do that much about it. But Tron players, okay, there's also one aspect, because Tron as a deck has options, but Tron players very often don't see these options, because for some reason Tron is considered as very easy deck to play, and
which is not true.
And Tron players are playing the deck really badly. And when
that's
I'm winning
against
Tron, I'm very often winning because my opponent does not know what to do, and that's not the best feeling in the world, because you should lose. For example, like I was playing Dredge in the PTQ, and I was playing versus Tron opponent who just had Relic on the board and couldn't make a land drop. So I had only Silver Small Gold in play, like 3 cards in hand, 0 things in the graveyard, and they decided to crack the Relic to find the land drop. And then I went for Discovery and won the game. So
that's true. I think people are often mistaking straightforward for easy because Tron game plan is straightforward, but it doesn't mean the deck is easy by no means. But yeah, still think that Tron is bad, and there is very little that can basically convince me otherwise, unless people just start digging up their Lilianas and Bloodbraids and just playing Jant all over again.
I don't feel the matchup with Jant. Like, okay, Jędrek, I have to say, your opinions about Tron are from 2017, and that's really
No, I don't think that Tron is like 80% against Jant, but Tron is favored against Jant. Still. I don't believe that Tron isn't favored against Jant. I just can't believe it. Unless Jant is playing like, I don't know, Magus or Fulminator Mage or something like that. You are just, like, Tron will just beat turn 3 Grease or Liliana into turn 4 Bloodbraid Elf, and you will just lose to this.
Okay, how about Bossedru and Vren? If you are playing versus Boomer Jant, they will have a lot of Bossedrus.
Will they have a lot of Bossedrus?
And then Vren. I would say that 2 or 3 is easy.
I don't think I've seen more than 1 in any list.
I don't want to argue because that's talking about the numbers.
I still think that
the deck that's close to that, but still
you are good against the mopey mid-range decks with Tron, and especially if your plan is like you are playing Karn, Great Creator, and Fractask, and you have like lower curve threats, because like, okay, you can Bossedru the Tron deck all you want, but they will Fractask, and you can't beat Fractask pretty often as Jant, because it's just not what you are equipped to beat.
True.
So yeah, okay, let's move on to another deck that conveniently also, I think, is really good, or maybe not really good, but good against against Tron, and this is Storm. Storm will also beat Tron. Quite often.
I'm again 3 relics, 3 warping whale, OP. Maybe
they won't have it. They have to develop their own board, Sodek.
But we always have Tron from the hand, yes.
They don't always have it.
Okay.
I think they have. Karsten at some point muffed it out, and I think he had pretty strict mulligan guidelines, like you should do with Tron. You should mulligan a lot with the deck, and I think under those guidelines you have like 35% to have Tron plus Karn on 3. I think so.
That's a lot.
Yeah, but in most of those draws, you will have to, fire up Expedition Map on 2 or Sylvan's Crying or something like that.
Expedition Map is very tricky because you play turn 1, then turn 2 keep mana, so you have an option to play Warping Whale.
You are so scared of Warping Whale. I've never seen anyone so scared about a 2-mana envelope as you are. Like, ever.
You know how powerful this deck, this effect is? You play...
I got my Ragavans exiled many times with the card.
You build your whole game plan to resolve Reforge the Souls, and you have your garbage pile with one Belcher and a lot of mana.
Luckily, Storm isn't Belcher, and you are not scooping to one Warping Whale.
That's true. Although we can exile Barrel.
That's true, but you are a combo deck with 4 fucking remands in your main deck.
That's true.
Like, you are now the one just waiting for them to tap out. And they have to at some point. I think you can even remand Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, and live with those 2 lands exiled. And you will still win, probably, if you untap. Because Ulamog at turn 4 at best, you remand, and then you still have 3 lands in play. And you will win over 3 lands quite often, I think.
If you always have everything, you win. Okay, let's leave the Tron deck altogether because we can just keep this discussion all the time. Okay, Storm, the deck that was considered as the combo deck from the old era when turn 3 was something that was like something like cheating, unbeatable, shouldn't be allowed, etc. Yeah, Henrik?
One more deck that's good against Tron is Neoform.
Okay, I can buy it. Okay, and Storm got a few upgrades that were not played it wasn't a lot of a lot of movement around these changes, and there were not enough hype about, for example, Wish, about something like new cantrips like Discover the Impossible. I'm not even sure what it's doing. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. Exile one of them face down, put the rest at the bottom. You may cast exiled card without paying its mana cost. It's transferred to mana value 2 or less. If you don't put it into your hand.
It's basically
Sounds
like a
cool.
cantrip with ritual attached to it, more or less. It was pretty
That's
good when
nice.
I played against. I played against Sunbird, who I believe top 8 in the PTQ. It was Sunbird.
Yeah. I'm
Sunbird
looking
17 or
at
something.
his list.
Yeah, so I played against them in Prelim yesterday, and this card, Glimpse of Impossible, it's called? Or Glimpse of Possible?
Yes, discover the impossible.
Discover the Impossible. It was pretty good. It was pretty good. Also, Galvanic Relay out of the sideboard was pretty good.
Yeah, I also always wanted to say that, like, the card that's already banned in Pauper has its first moments in the modern format, and in this slower matchups when you can play like 2-3 cantrips or play a creature, they kill it, you play ritual, then Galvanic Relay, you draw 5 cards for your next turn, so you can go again and again and again, and the opponents will slowly run out of resources to stop you. That's really cool. Like, I really like the addition of Wish. That's really,
Which is strong for sure.
yeah, that's really something that I wanted to see in the deck.
I'm not a fan of 0 Blood Moons in the sideboard, I think.
I don't like Blood Moon at all.
I think you want one with Wish. Just one. I think it's so high impact.
Okay,
Quite
how
often.
often you want to wish for Blood Moon and you have 3 mana to cast Blood Moon instead of just killing the opponent?
Well, I guess you have to play it on the same turn as. Well, it's pretty common to wish to play Relay and then wait till next turn. But against, for example, I don't know, Amulet or Tron, would you rather have Relay or Blood Moon? I think Blood Moon is the answer.
I don't think that you will ever consider Relay versus Amulet. So I would maybe, instead of what you are saying, I would go for Past in Flames and try to kill them on turn 3
I think
before their saga ticks up, yeah? Maybe.
I think
maybe
there
that's
are. You will be at those situations pretty often that your only or your best bet is to go like ritual, wish, blood moon, and then you have, I don't know, like gifts in hand or whatever, and you try to go next turn because you don't have a creature, so you don't have enough mana to go on this turn, but you want to slow them down by like 2 turns or whatever that blood moon does.
Yeah.
And
you know, like, to play Blood Moon, you would have to rebuild the whole mana base because
I don't
mana
think
base
you need to.
is right now is fetchless, and you have only 4 mana more for this.
I think it's
later on.
fine.
I think it's not fine.
I think it's fine for this purpose. You will never sideboard this blood moon in, but I do think that it's worth it.
You know, I'm not a Storm expert. I don't see
Neither
it,
am I.
Maybe.
Well,
Nice
last time I
discussion
played
we have
Storm, Boyle was
It was
meta.
It was in Vintage Cube, maybe.
No. I actually 5-0'd. Well, I guess last time I played Storm, it was in Vintage Cube. But I played 1 or 2 leagues with Storm when Uro was in the format. And yeah, it was pretty good with Boils.
Oh yeah, that was cool.
But do you want to know my opinion about Storm?
It's bad?
Storm is bad. Yeah.
Okay.
Like,
I wanted to say that all these strange decks that had a result, in my opinion, and like, but in Jędrzej's opinion, based on what we were talking about before we started recording, it's more because the decks are like everyone are trying new stuff. The decks aren't tuned enough, or people just ignore you that much to the point when your fringe strategy is actually good.
Storm will never be a tier even 2 deck in Modern, I think. It's just impossible.
I think tier 2 is acceptable. Tier 1, never. Easy.
No, I think it won't even be like tier 2. Like, my problem with it is that, of course, Force of Negation got its Storm. But the real spit in the face, in my opinion, was Cascade decks start becoming good, and then people are playing Flusterstorm. Like, if your plan is to wish for Galvanic Relay and your opponent just have fucking Flusterstorm instead of Spell Pierce in their deck because it's better against Cascade, like, no.
I feel that, like, maybe after this weekend with Rhinos, maybe people will play like one Flusterstorm, etc. Overall, like, the last month have shown that Flusterstorm is much worse compared to Spell Pierce because it counters fewer things. Of course, if there's a lot of Cascade
Well,
upkeep,
Lurrus got
they
banned.
will...
Everything changed. So
Everything? Like,
yeah, I do think that everything, in this regard at least, everything changed.
Okay, so we can maybe very nicely go to the another sections. Our opinions about the format.
Yeah, general impressions of the first
general impressions.
week.
What do like? Do you think that the modern is very different compared to what it was before?
No, but I do think that everything changed in the discussion of, like, when I said everything changed, I meant for Spell Pierce versus Flusterstorm in like deck like Hammer, because you will play against much more Cascade decks.
But versus Cascade, if you are blue-white, you still have Meddling Mages, Lavinias, etc. And I don't see it being a huge problem. Plus, Spell Pierce will be enough because your fast clock will force them to cascade very fast. So then Spell Pierce, it will be easier to... like.
Okay, but you will see more
Flusterstorm
Flusterstorm from like slower decks, I think.
Yeah, Merktide, for example. Merktide likes to play one.
Blue-white.
Blue-white, OMG.
Do you know what? If you are playing Storm and you are playing Gifts Ungiven and your opponent has one green mana, they can Veil of Summer your Gifts Ungiven. Which is...
That's rude.
Like,
that's really rude.
That's just so barbaric. It's...
Yeah, that's the worst.
Oh my fuck. Like, why? Why did they word Gifts Ungiven this way? Even though Fact or Fiction is worded in a way that's not susceptible to Veil of Summer or to Hexproof effect. Just why? Because they were afraid that this card is too strong or something?
I don't think so. I think that's like someone in the
Think
WotC was
think.
Well, someone in WotC was too drunk to figure out that
Gifts Ungiven getting countered by Veil of Summer is second rudest thing that Veil of Summer can do. Do you know what the first one?
Veiling your counter spell?
No.
Veiling your Archmage's charm?
No.
So I don't know.
Veiling your Cruel Ultimatum, of course.
Okay.
I genuinely wanted to play Cruel Ultimatum like 2 months ago in Grixis, in sideboard for 4-color. But then I realized that they will just veil it. And I was like, okay, I'm done with this shit. I want to play Cruel Ultimatum.
Okay, that was good. Okay, but general impressions. In my opinion, some positioning of the,
Okay,
the top
I might
decks
freeze you for a second. I hope I won't, because I want to open...
OMG.
Okay, I don't think you are frozen. Everything's Gucci, because I want to, when we are talking about the metagame, I want to have it in front of my eyes as well, because normally I have Sodek on one monitor and our notes for the video, and then on the second monitor is our faces to see if everything is going well in OBS. So usually I don't have Goldfish in front of me, but now I do. Also, if you want to see an accurate metagame on Goldfish, I recommend switching to 7 days instead of 30 days for now. Because in 30 days metagame, they are showing you decks from the last 30 days, but they are just erasing Lurrus decks. So suddenly Hammer is like 15th most popular decks because it was a Lurrus deck before, and now it doesn't have Lurrus. So all the results with Lurrus are erased, and you can't find Hammer anywhere. Similarly to, I guess, Death Shadow. So yeah. I do think that biggest winners of the Lurrus ban, once again, are Rhinos and probably Merktide Regent, the card Merktide Regent. Yeah, I don't know if Blue Red or Grixis Shadow take on Merctide is better yet. And that's something we'll figure out in the next few weeks, I guess. Also, I guess Titan got a bit better.
Yeah, I wanted to say that Titan had its problems. Boseju kinda solved most of them, and the ban of Lurrus got the deck like got rid of the one of the worst matchups and the dress down lock, and that's
Yeah,
why
Dress
the
Down Log was
amulet
like,
very hard to beat, like close to unbeatable here. So
especially out of a deck like Shadow, because out of like control decks, you still have to kill a 6/6. But if you are playing Shadow, you just have your Shadow, which is bigger than 6/6, and you don't really care about like Colossal Dreadmaw at that point.
And outside that, in a short, like we could maybe separate these expectations and our feelings about the meta game, like in short term and long term. And short term, I see that many like not very good decks are one more time played by a lot of players online, at least. And I totally understand that because people want to see if their ideas are good or not. Mostly they are not, but they need to check it out. And like in Mban for or more, we'll go to our long term predictions, and I just don't feel that much will change. Like we'll see most of the top decks being still at the top. For example, I expect to see Hammer at the top still. I expect to see Merc-type decks at the top. I expect to see 4-color. Like we haven't talked about 4-color yet, but the deck still had a really good showing, both in the challenge and the PTQ. And nothing looks like it can stop it.
Yeah, I would
So
also, regarding long term predictions, I would kind of want to wait for new Capina to drop because multicolor sets tend to have pretty pushed cards in them.
true, because of hard casting costs here.
With like, and you have two shards that are good for color, right? You have Band and Naya, and first of all, you are getting new triumphs. There's a chance that there are some better combinations with those triumphs than you already have, because I think, in my opinion, the most important part of the triumphs are like which triumph is the best one in 4-color decks is what's the best pairing of triumph plus Shockland. Or Triumph plus Shockland plus Basic, if you are playing like 4-color with Abundant Growth and everything else. So this might change, and also you are getting 2 full shards of other good cards.
Like uncommons, etc.
Yeah, uncommons, rares. You can also get like a blue-white card that is supposed to be an Esper shard that will be good in 4-color, or red-green card from Jant. Basically, the only shard that won't really get you anything, I think, is Grixis, because then black is the middle color. So I think in shards, like they will probably have some like wedge cards. Like if you have Grixis, you will get like a blue-red card probably, or 2 in the set. But mostly it will be like black-red and blue-red, black-red and blue-black and 3-color. So yeah, I still think that we should wait for shards to really think about long term. For now, I would stick with short term predictions because there are just so many variables that predicting anything in a longer span of time than like month and a half or something. And we'll start getting previews from Capina, I think, in 2 or 3 weeks.
Nice.
So yeah. Also, one more like about long-term predictions. I remember that Sam Black posted a thread on Twitter about the White Planeswalker, Wandering Emperor, and he was asking people if they think that Wandering Emperor is a better card than Jace, and if it will see more play by like July in Modern or something. And I guess that's just me venting on Wandering Emperor more than anything else. But it's just so hard for me to accept that a Planeswalker is compared favorably to Jace. Jace is just so good.
Imagine playing Jace in Flash end of turn of opponent's turn.
Yeah, but you can't seriously compare the impact of Wandering Emperor if you untap with them. And
Wandering Emperor is like really shitty. The only upside of it is when you cast it in.
and if you untap with Jace, you win pretty often. So
yeah,
I don't know. Like I still think that Wandering Emperor is a good card, and I think I still think you should play it in blue-white. But claiming that it's like top 5 planeswalkers of all time, I think it would have hard time being in top 15, honestly. Like, improp to top 5. Top 5 of planeswalkers off the top of your head. Oko, number 1. Ren is probably in top 5 as well. I think top 5 is like Oko, Ren, Narset, Jace, and depending on how you... come again?
Teferi?
Like
Time
depending on
Raveler?
how you really rate card, it can be Teferi Time Raveler, it can be Karn Liberated,
Karn Great Creator too.
Karn Great Creator, I guess. Maybe Ugin. Like depending on what you are really. Like,
Yeah, that's true.
and also, like even if we want to talk about dominance in Standard, I think the most dominant Planeswalker in Standard ever, well, it was obviously Jace because it got banned.
As per Sans Champion, I would say.
I would say Gideon Alev Zendikar.
Oh, that's
Gideon
true.
was like...
That was a powerful one.
Yeah, like Wandering Emperor, not top 5 Planeswalker of all time, not a top 10 Planeswalker of all time, maybe a top 15 in my opinion. But also, it's a really good, really well-designed card. I have to agree on that. Card is really well-designed. I think it's extremely hard to design a balanced Planeswalker with Flash. And I think Wandering Emperor is balanced.
Yeah, I like it too.
It's a balanced card, and props to Wizards for that. Yeah. So, do we want to go to our picks for now?
About our picks, I wanted to like separate this and talk about the decks we are, writing about, etc., and the top picks about the format.
Yeah.
So about our decks, by our decks I mean the decks that you can find. For example, a sideboard guide on Modern Solutions. Like from my part, it will be
decks that we will realistically choose from.
Yeah,
basically, because
yeah.
So like we will have 2 lists. If you are a soulless, heartless robot that can just pick anything, and you don't have any preference at all. So like basically, if you don't have any emotional attachment to any deck, if you have unlimited funds and playtest time, and you'll play everything on the same capacity, this is one list. And then if you are Little Sodek or Little Yendrek, there is other lists that you can choose from.
So from my
you have Sodek's poster on the wall, and then you can choose from those decks. Not use Sodek. You won't have your own poster.
Yeah.
But if you go to my bedroom, there might be a Sodek poster on my wall.
What?
We will never know.
I can even check it later on. Just need to go to Poznań. Okay. Moving to the list. About Dredge, I was playing Dredge in the last week, and I had like a bit, like something like 63% of the win rate, which is nice, but also not good enough to win any bigger event. And sure, the overall, like I played like 16 matches, maybe a bit less than that. So that like does not have a problem with Lurrus looping Spellbomb anymore, but it still has other problems, most likely with itself, which is kind of sad because we can't solve it. By any mean, like I was losing a bit too much to my own mulligans, etc. I still think that it is a really good deck for like certain meta games. For example, like in my LGS, there's a lot of Merc-type decks around, and if there are Merc-type Shadow decks, like especially like all Ragavan decks, are really good matchup for Dredge. And if that's your meta, and or for example you expect to see a lot of Ragavan decks in the tournament, Dredge will be great. But there are also other decks that are problematic, and I hope that we'll get something new to make the deck better, or maybe a better Dredger, because I also think that all Dredger's problems would be solved in if Golgari deck had the Dredge 5, or if Golgari Gravethrower was unbanned, but I don't see it being changed in near future. Moving on, Reinkent, I think it's a really well positioned deck right now. About the build, I saw people playing Boseju more and more. I'm not the biggest fan of it. Maybe I will try playing it in the sideboard. Especially because I'm not the biggest fan of Lane of Sanctity nowadays, so maybe I will cut it. Moving on, Belcher. Belcher has like the Lurrus ban changed one thing, that there's not that many Grixis shadows around, but still there's a lot of Merktide, there's a lot of new Grixis shadow. So I don't feel that the change hasn't like been very impactful for the deck. So the deck still has a lot of 10 free wins, and that's cool. But on the other hand, Boseju is extremely annoying and losing to it. So it's still fine, but it's nothing extremely spectacular. About Oops, I wouldn't touch Oops in near future because how meta is wild, and you can't think about what you can expect. And Oops are again really good at exploiting certain meta games. For example, if you think that people are slowing down and does not have Grave Hate, play Oops, win tournament, and then pack your deck to your deck box and not play it for some 6 months or so. Okay, another deck. I can also say something about Burn, because Fracom wrote something for Burn, and I also know that Fracom wants to update the Burn guide after Lurrus band being banned, so stay tuned and check for updates. Still, the ban of Lurrus wasn't that impactful for the deck. The deck is still in a very the same position as it was before. So just if you like this type of gameplay, play it. Maybe win something. Who knows? Jendrek.
Okay. So first of all, I think the argument about 60 to 63% win rate being bad because it's not the win rate you win tournament with is total bullshit, because you will never get a win rate. You will never, like, how much, what's your score to win the tournament? Like 10 and 2 total? 10 and 1? You will never get over 90% win rate with any deck. Because it doesn't happen.
But on the other hand,
I think,
when I was
okay,
playing
I just don't want to make it
just
too long. I do think that upwards of 60% win rate in like
it's really good. Yeah,
it's just a win rate that you are satisfied with, and that's it. Okay.
Kinda yes, but on the other hand, if I'm playing a leagues, I'm expecting myself to get a higher win rate than
Yeah,
the
that's
average
true.
win rate.
But also like kind of whatever. Okay. About my picks, I've been playing blue black and then pivoted into Esper after Lurrus was banned, and so far it's the only deck I've played post Lurrus ban. I really enjoyed it so far, and I would, I guess, recommend playing it if you want to play Snapcaster because you're a stubborn donkey like I am. It's basically blue black with endings and a march of otherworldly light, because I do think you need answers for Saga in the main deck, as I've said. And then like Kaya's Gael, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, I think really good card right now, because I do think that there will be much less unholy hits going on, at least for some time right now.
Yeah.
Because Shadow is less popular. People are playing less Lurrus-centric like Giant decks and red-black decks, so they will be playing less bubbles, and they will be more about like bolt and decay and push and terminate to kill Murktide and stuff like this, and less about unholy hit. So the plan of turn 5 slam Teferi, untap, have a counterspell or drown is really good again, I think. So I would do that. I also tried playing 26 lands, and I do think that playing a lot of lands is a pretty unexplored aspect of control decks in Modern. I would recommend trying it. Like you are just
especially when your lands are doing things.
Yes.
Nowadays.
So I basically had 24 lands before, and 2 considers, and I cut those 2 considers, and I just added 1 irrigated farmland, which is the blue-white cycle land. It is basically a placeholder for Triumph. I want to see how much having a tablet will affect your development, how much you will actually end up cycling it. Of course, you will cycle Triumph less often because A, it costs 3 mana, and B, it adds all of your colors. But I don't think it's that crazy to play like 2 Triumphs in your deck, and you just want to have this slightly higher land count, and then you just cycle the second one if you draw it. And then I added Hall of the Storm Giants as my second land, and I swapped one of the Sunken Ruins because I added 2 blue sources, so I don't think I needed that many filter lands for Castle Vantress. So now I have like a Vantress, Irrigated Farmland, 2 Hall of Storm Giants, and 1 Otawara. So I have 5 lands that do stuff. Some of them in play, some of them only in hand, but still. Like, you will often see pro players and like really good players saying that the first thing they do when they take a deck list off of internet is cut 2 random cards for 2 more lands, because people are like just chronically putting too few lands in their deck, and I think it's true. Like, especially if you are playing those type of decks, like you have those big spells. I have like 3 Teferis, 2 Deluges, a Jace. So you have like 6 really big cards that basically can solo the game. Just put lands in your deck, because you will mostly lose if you don't draw lands, not if you don't draw spells. So do that. And as far as like best decks for somebody without any preferences and yada yada, what I said before, I guess I will start now. I like Murktide and I like Rhinos. Hammer is probably good too, but I think that I would start with those 2.
I would,
Murktide and
like,
Rhinos.
if you have too much money to spend, I would also think about 4 color.
I'm not a fan of 4 color for now.
I feel that like this very long term the deck will be always solid. So
That's
like,
true.
assuming if you want to start now, starting with 4 color won't be the bad idea.
Yeah,
That's
well,
my reasoning.
True, but I think for the next like 2 or 3 weeks, people will still try to play like Storm and I don't know, other combo
things.
decks, and that's not the best meta game for 4 color. But if people just settle on playing like I don't know, Hammer and Giant and Shadow, then sure, play 4 color. It's fine.
I also want to point out that Amulet is really good. In my opinion.
Amulet is pretty good, yeah. I would
like, if you want to like start now or like learn the deck, I feel that Amulet is in a nice position. Also, Yavmod sounds not as terrible as it was like before, and like I was talking to Demonic Tutors, and he said that the deck got much better without Lurrus. And
we'll see.
I can buy it. Yeah, this can be true.
We'll see. Okay, I think that's it for now. What we will have for you next week, we don't know yet. We'll see. I think there is a showcase next weekend.
On 26th.
6th.
Yeah.
And also after the showcase weekend, there's a PTQ like chain. There will be super qualifier every day. And
What?
there is one on Monday and one on Friday in Modern, and they are both on like humane hours for Europe. Like, I don't know, 2 p.m. or 3 p.m., something like that. No more 11 p.m. Friday one, which was worse for us. So there are like, yeah, there will be a showcase and 2 super qualifiers in not this next week, but week after that, the last week of March, which will be pretty cool. So definitely a lot of data from that one to talk about. And yeah. I guess we can plug our own content as always. Below you, there will be links to our streams, our Twitter, stuff like that, but mostly, most importantly, to our Patreon, which is our main form of content. If you want to support us and get everything right on time when it got released and all the guides that you can only get there, just click it, support us. We'll have money to print more Sodek posters for our walls and to buy Coke Zero and other things that we really, really like.
Maybe we can start a merch, you know?
Can start merchandise.
Sodek
yeah,
poster true. Sounds really cool.
Sodek posters are
I'm
cool.
into it.
Sodek Max? I think Sodek Max are good too.
Sodek Max.
Okay, we're gonna see you next week. Take care and bye-bye.
See ya.
Czekaj.